Question 1. Stakeholder feedback indicates that the current security dashboard is too technical and does not effectively communicate the organization's overall security posture to executive leadership. The security team has access to a wealth of raw log data and threat intelligence feeds. Which approach should the security team prioritize when redesigning the dashboard to address this feedback? Option A. Implement a dashboard that aggregates key performance indicators, KPI, and key risk indicators, CRI, relevant to business objectives, using clear visualizations and executive-level summaries. Option B. Focus on showcasing the volume and variety of security tools deployed, emphasizing the technical capabilities of the security infrastructure. Option C. Create a dashboard that prioritizes the display of obscure technical vulnerabilities and their corresponding CVE numbers, assuming leadership will appreciate the depth of technical detail. Option D. Display all raw security event logs and alerts in real time, allowing stakeholders to drill down into individual events for detailed analysis. The correct answer is A. Implement a dashboard that aggregates key performance indicators, KPI, and key risk indicators, CRI, relevant to business objectives, using clear visualizations and executive-level summaries. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, translating raw security data into actionable intelligence that meets diverse stakeholder needs. The difficulty lies in balancing technical accuracy with business relevance, ensuring that the dashboard provides a clear, concise, and meaningful overview of the security posture, without overwhelming users with excessive technical jargon or irrelevant metrics. The pressure to deliver a solution quickly, coupled with varying levels of technical understanding among stakeholders, necessitates a strategic and user-centric approach to dashboard design. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes understanding stakeholder requirements and tailoring the dashboard content accordingly. This aligns with best practices in information security management, which emphasize clear communication and the alignment of security objectives with business goals. By focusing on key performance indicators, KPI, and key risk indicators, CRI, that directly address stakeholder concerns, such as the number of critical vulnerabilities, the time to detect and respond to incidents, and the overall compliance status, the dashboard becomes a valuable tool for informed decision-making. This approach fosters trust and transparency, ensuring that security investments are understood and supported by leadership. From a regulatory perspective, demonstrating effective risk management and compliance through clear reporting is often a requirement, and a well-designed dashboard facilitates this. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves prioritizing the display of all available raw data without filtering or aggregation. This fails to meet the needs of non-technical stakeholders, leading to confusion and a lack of actionable insights. It also represents a failure in effective communication and risk management, as critical information can be lost in the noise. Ethically, it can be seen as a disservice to stakeholders who rely on clear information for their decision-making. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on technical metrics that are easily accessible, but may not directly reflect the organization's risk posture or business impact. This can lead to a dashboard that looks impressive to security professionals, but is meaningless to executives, hindering support for security initiatives. This approach neglects the fundamental principle of aligning security with business objectives and can lead to misallocation of resources. A third incorrect approach is to create a dashboard that is overly complex and requires extensive training for users to understand. While technically comprehensive, it fails in its primary purpose of providing accessible information. This can lead to underutilization of the dashboard and a perception that security is overly complicated and inaccessible, potentially undermining confidence in the security team. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a user-centric design process. This involves initial stakeholder interviews to identify their specific information needs, risk tolerance, and desired outcomes. Subsequently, a phased approach to dashboard development, starting with a minimal viable product, MVP, and iterating based on feedback, is recommended. Regular review and refinement of the dashboard's metrics and presentation are crucial to ensure its continued relevance and effectiveness. Professionals must also consider the organization's specific regulatory environment and ensure that the dashboard supports compliance reporting and risk management obligations. Question 2. Assessment of a cybersecurity team's vulnerability management process reveals a tendency to address vulnerabilities based on their CVSS score alone. The CySA is concerned that this approach may not adequately protect the organization's most critical assets. Which of the following strategies represents the most effective and professionally sound method for prioritizing vulnerabilities within the context of U.S. cybersecurity regulations and best practices? Option A. Address vulnerabilities in the order they are discovered to ensure a systematic and comprehensive approach. Option B. Integrate CVSS scores with business context, such as asset criticality and potential impact, to derive a risk-based prioritization. Option C. Prioritize vulnerabilities based solely on their CVSS score, as this provides an objective measure of technical severity. Option D. Focus remediation efforts on vulnerabilities that are easiest and quickest to fix, regardless of their severity or potential impact. The correct answer is B. Integrate CVSS scores with business context, such as asset criticality and potential impact, to derive a risk-based prioritization. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations: limited resources and a continuous influx of potential vulnerabilities. The Chief Information Security Officer, CySA, must balance the need for immediate action with the strategic allocation of resources to address the most critical threats. The pressure to demonstrate ROI and compliance, coupled with the dynamic nature of the threat landscape, makes effective vulnerability prioritization a complex and high-stakes task. The CySA needs to move beyond a simple fix-everything mentality to a risk-based approach that aligns with business objectives and regulatory expectations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a risk-based prioritization strategy that leverages the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, CVSS, as a foundational element. This method is best professional practice because it directly addresses the core principle of risk management, focusing resources on threats that pose the greatest potential harm to the organization. CVSS provides a standardized, objective measure of a vulnerability technical severity, which is a crucial input for risk assessment. By combining CVSS scores with business context, e.g., asset criticality, exploitability in the wild, potential impact on business operations, the CySA can create a prioritized list that reflects the actual risk to the organization. This aligns with the general principles of cybersecurity governance and risk management frameworks, which emphasize a risk-informed approach to security investments and operations. While specific U.S. regulations like NIST SB 800-53 or the Cybersecurity Enhancement Act of 2015 mandate risk management, the underlying principle of prioritizing based on risk is universally applicable and expected in professional practice. Incorrect approaches analysis. Prioritizing vulnerabilities solely based on their CVSS score, without considering business context, is an incomplete approach. While CVSS provides a technical severity score, it doesn't account for the value of the asset being exploited or the likelihood of a successful attack in the organization's specific environment. This can lead to misallocation of resources, where high-severity vulnerabilities on non-critical systems might be addressed before lower-severity vulnerabilities on highly sensitive data or critical infrastructure. This failure to integrate business impact can lead to regulatory scrutiny if it results in a significant breach of sensitive data or disruption of essential services, as many compliance frameworks implicitly or explicitly require a risk-based approach that considers business impact. Prioritizing vulnerabilities based on the order in which they are discovered, without any scoring or risk assessment, is a reactive and inefficient strategy. This approach ignores the technical severity and potential business impact of each vulnerability, leading to a chaotic and potentially ineffective security posture. It is a clear abdication of professional responsibility to manage risk effectively, and would likely be considered a failure to implement adequate security controls under most regulatory frameworks that mandate proactive risk management. Prioritizing vulnerabilities based on the ease of remediation, without considering their severity or potential impact, is also a flawed strategy. While efficient remediation is desirable, focusing on easy fixes over critical threats can leave the organization exposed to significant risks. This approach prioritizes operational convenience over security effectiveness and can lead to a false sense of security. It fails to meet the professional obligation to protect organizational assets from significant harm and could be viewed as a compliance failure if it results in preventable security incidents. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured, risk-based approach to vulnerability prioritization. This involves 1. Asset identification and classification. Understand what assets are critical to the organization's operations and data. 2. Vulnerability discovery and assessment. Utilize scanning tools and threat intelligence to identify vulnerabilities. 3. CVSS scoring. Obtain the CVSS score for each identified vulnerability to understand its technical severity. 4. Contextualization. Overlay business context onto the CVSS score. This includes factors like asset criticality, data sensitivity, exploitability, e.g., is there active exploitation in the wild, and potential business impact, financial, reputational, operational. 5. Risk calculation. Combine technical severity with business context to derive a risk score. 6. Prioritization and remediation planning. Rank vulnerabilities based on their risk score and develop a remediation plan that allocates resources effectively. 7. Continuous monitoring and reevaluation. The threat landscape and business priorities change, so vulnerability prioritization must be an ongoing process. This systematic approach ensures that resources are directed towards the most significant threats, aligning security efforts with business objectives and regulatory requirements for effective risk management. Question 3. Comparative studies suggest that optimizing a security information and event management (SIEM) system for enhanced threat detection and incident response is a continuous process. Given the need to balance comprehensive monitoring with resource constraints, which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices for SIEM process optimization? Option A. Maintain the initial SIEM configuration without regular review or updates, assuming that the deployed rules and log sources will remain effective indefinitely against evolving threats. Option B. Ingest all available log sources from every system and device within the network to ensure no potential security event is missed, regardless of its immediate relevance or operational impact. Option C. Implement a vast array of complex correlation rules based on theoretical attack scenarios, without extensive testing or validation. To cover every conceivable threat, Option D. Prioritize the ingestion of log sources critical for compliance and incident investigation, and tune correlation rule to minimize false positives and maximize the detection of high-fidelity security events. Correct answer is D. Prioritize the ingestion of log sources critical for compliance and incident investigation, and tune correlation rules to minimize false positives and maximize the detection of high-fidelity security events. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations. Optimizing a security information and event management (SIEM) system for maximum effectiveness without overwhelming resources or introducing new vulnerabilities. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for comprehensive threat detection with the practical limitations of data storage, processing power, and analyst workload. Careful judgment is required to prioritize log sources and correlation rules that yield the highest return on investment in terms of security posture improvement. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the core objective of SIEM optimization, enhancing threat detection and response capabilities by focusing on high-value data. By prioritizing log sources that are critical for compliance and incident investigation, and by tuning correlation rules to reduce false positives and highlight genuine threats, the organization maximizes the utility of its SIEM investment. This aligns with the principles of risk management and operational efficiency, ensuring that security resources are allocated where they will have the greatest impact. Furthermore, this approach supports regulatory compliance by ensuring that essential audit trails and security event data are captured and analyzed, which is a common requirement across various cybersecurity frameworks and regulations relevant to the CompTIA CySA+ exam scope. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on ingesting every possible log source without regard for its security value or operational impact is professionally unacceptable. This leads to data sprawl, increased storage and processing costs, and a higher volume of noise that can obscure actual threats, making effective incident detection and response more difficult. This can also lead to regulatory failures if critical security events are lost in the deluge of irrelevant data, hindering auditability and compliance reporting. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the implementation of numerous complex correlation rules without proper tuning and validation is equally problematic. This often results in a high rate of false positives, leading to alert fatigue among security analysts. Analysts may begin to ignore alerts, increasing the risk of missing genuine security incidents. This inefficiency undermines the purpose of the SIEM and can be seen as a failure in due diligence and effective resource management, potentially violating ethical obligations to maintain a robust security posture. A third incorrect approach that neglects regular review and updates of the SIEM configuration, including log source prioritization and correlation rules, is also professionally unsound. The threat landscape is constantly evolving, and new vulnerabilities and attack vectors emerge regularly. A static SIEM configuration will quickly become outdated, diminishing its effectiveness in detecting contemporary threats. This lack of proactive maintenance can lead to significant security gaps and potential breaches, representing a failure to adapt to changing risks. A professional reasoning process for such situations should involve a risk-based assessment. Security teams should identify critical assets and data, understand relevant compliance requirements, and then determine which log sources and events are most crucial for monitoring and defending these assets. Regular performance reviews of the SIEM, including analysis of alert efficacy and resource utilization, should inform ongoing tuning and optimization efforts. Collaboration with IT operations and compliance teams is essential to ensure that the SIEM strategy aligns with broader organizational objectives and regulatory obligations. Question 4. The performance metrics show a significant increase in attempted exploits targeting a known vulnerability in a widely used web server application. The security team has identified a patch released by the vendor. Considering the potential for business disruption versus the urgency of remediation, which of the following actions best aligns with industry, best practices, and regulatory expectations for incident response and corrective controls in the United States? Option A. Prioritize patching only the servers that have shown recent suspicious activity, leaving other servers with the vulnerability unpatched for the time being. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive system rebuild of all affected servers from known good backups, bypassing the patching process entirely. Option C. Conduct thorough testing of the patch in a staging environment to validate its effectiveness and compatibility before a phased rollout to production servers, accompanied by rollback procedures. Option D. Immediately deploy the vendor-provided patch to all production servers without prior testing to minimize the window of exposure. The correct answer is D. Immediately deploy the vendor-provided patch to all production servers without prior testing to minimize the window of exposure. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity incident response, balancing the urgency of remediation with the need for thoroughness and compliance. The professional challenge lies in the potential for rapid, but incomplete, patching to reintroduce vulnerabilities or fail to address the root cause, while overly cautious approaches can lead to extended downtime and business impact. Careful judgment is required to select a patching strategy that is both effective and compliant with relevant regulations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and documented process aligned with established incident response frameworks. This includes thorough analysis of the vulnerability, identification of affected systems, testing of the patch in a controlled environment, and a phased rollout with verification. This methodical approach minimizes the risk of introducing new issues, ensures that the remediation is effective, and provides an auditable trail for compliance purposes. In the U.S. regulatory landscape, frameworks like NIST SB 800-61, Computer Security Incident Handling Guide, and the principles of the Cybersecurity Enhancement Act of 2015 emphasize timely and effective incident response, which includes robust patching and system restoration procedures. A documented and verified patching process demonstrates due diligence and adherence to these principles, which are often implicitly or explicitly required by various industry-specific regulations and contractual obligations. An incorrect approach that involves immediately deploying a patch without testing fails to meet the professional standard of care. This bypasses critical validation steps, increasing the risk of system instability, further security breaches due to an untested patch, or even denial of service conditions. Ethically and regulatorily, This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the potential impact on the organization and its stakeholders. Could lead to violations of data protection laws if the hasty patch results in a subsequent breach. Another incorrect approach, which is to delay patching indefinitely due to fear of disruption, is also professionally unacceptable. This inaction leaves systems vulnerable to known exploits, directly contravening the principle of timely remediation. Organizations have a responsibility to protect their data and systems, and prolonged exposure to known vulnerabilities is a clear failure of that responsibility. This can result in significant regulatory penalties, especially under regulations like HIPAA for healthcare organizations or PCI DSS for payment card processors, which mandate timely patching of known vulnerabilities. Finally, an approach that involves patching only a subset of systems without a clear risk-based justification is problematic. This creates an inconsistent security posture, leaving critical systems potentially exposed while less critical ones are protected. This arbitrary approach lacks a sound technical or risk management basis and can be difficult to justify during an audit, potentially leading to findings of noncompliance with general security, best practices, and regulatory expectations for comprehensive security controls. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the incident and the vulnerability. This involves assessing the severity and exploitability of the threat. Next, they should consult established incident response plans and playbooks. The process should then move to risk assessment, patch testing in a non-production environment, a carefully planned deployment strategy, and post-deployment verification. Throughout this process, thorough documentation is paramount to demonstrate compliance and facilitate future analysis. Question 5. To address the challenge of effectively managing the vast amount of data generated by vulnerability scanning tools such as Nessus, OpenVAS, Qualys, and Rapid7 Insight VM, which approach best supports an organization's ability to prioritize remediation efforts and demonstrate due diligence in its cybersecurity posture. Option A. Correlating identified vulnerabilities with asset criticality and potential business impact to determine the most significant risks. Option B. Implementing remediation for vulnerabilities that are easiest and quickest to patch, irrespective of the asset's importance or the vulnerability exploitability. Option C. Prioritizing vulnerabilities based exclusively on the severity rating assigned by the vulnerability scanner vendor. Option D. Addressing vulnerabilities solely based on the total number of findings reported by the scan tool across all systems. Correct answer is A. Correlating identified vulnerabilities with asset criticality and potential business impact to determine the most significant risks. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity, prioritizing remediation efforts based on vulnerability scan results. The difficulty lies in translating raw scan data into actionable intelligence that aligns with business objectives and regulatory compliance. Without a structured approach, organizations risk wasting resources on low-impact vulnerabilities or overlooking critical risks that could lead to significant financial, reputational, or legal consequences. The sheer volume of data generated by tools like Nessus, OpenVAS, Qualys, and Rapid7 Insight VM necessitates a systematic method for impact assessment to ensure effective risk management. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves correlating identified vulnerabilities with asset criticality and potential business impact. This aligns with the principles of risk management, which is a cornerstone of cybersecurity best practices and is implicitly or explicitly required by various U.S. cybersecurity frameworks and regulations, e.g., NIST Cybersecurity Framework, which is often referenced in CompTIA exams. By understanding which assets are most critical to business operations, and then assessing the severity and exploitability of vulnerabilities on those assets, security teams can prioritize remediation efforts that offer the greatest reduction in overall risk. This approach ensures that resources are allocated efficiently and that the most significant threats are addressed first, thereby protecting the organization's most valuable assets and maintaining compliance with relevant data protection and security standards. Incorrect approach is analysis, focusing solely on the number of vulnerabilities reported by a scan tool, regardless of asset criticality or potential impact, is a flawed approach. This can lead to the misallocation of resources towards less critical systems, leaving high-value targets exposed. It fails to consider the business context and can result in a false sense of security or unnecessary alarm. Prioritizing vulnerabilities based on the vendor's severity rating alone, without considering the specific environment and potential exploitability, is also problematic. While vendor ratings are a useful starting point, they are often generic and may not accurately reflect the actual risk within a particular organization's unique configuration and threat landscape. This can lead to overlooking vulnerabilities that are highly exploitable in the specific environment, or overemphasizing those that pose a lower actual risk. Implementing remediation based on the ease of patching without considering the criticality of the affected asset or the severity of the vulnerability is a reactive and inefficient strategy. This approach prioritizes convenience over security, potentially leaving critical systems vulnerable while less important ones are patched. It neglects the fundamental principle of risk-based security and can lead to significant security gaps. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to vulnerability management. This involves 1. Asset identification and classification. Understand what assets are critical to the organization's mission and operations. 2. Vulnerability identification. Utilize scan tools Nessus, OpenVAS, Qualys Rapid7 Insight VM to identify vulnerabilities. 3. Risk assessment. Correlate identified vulnerabilities with asset criticality, threat intelligence, and exploitability to determine the potential impact. 4. Prioritization. Rank vulnerabilities based on their assessed risk level. 5. Remediation planning. Develop and execute a remediation plan, focusing on the highest risk vulnerabilities first. 6. Verification. Rescan to confirm that vulnerabilities have been successfully remediated. This systematic process ensures that security efforts are aligned with business objectives and regulatory requirements, maximizing the effectiveness of the security program. Question 6. The audit findings indicate that the organization's current threat intelligence capabilities are insufficient to meet the evolving threat landscape and potential regulatory reporting requirements under U.S. frameworks. Which of the following actions would best address these findings by enhancing the organization's threat intelligence posture in a compliant manner? Option A. Purchase the most advanced threat intelligence platform, TIP, available on the market and deploy it as a standalone solution to monitor external threat feeds without integrating it into the existing security infrastructure or developing specific operational procedures. Option B. Implement a threat intelligence platform, TIP, and integrate it with existing security tools, establishing clear workflows for ingesting, analyzing, and disseminating threat data to relevant stakeholders and incident response teams, while ensuring data handling aligns with U.S. privacy regulations. Option C. Focus on enhancing the organization's perimeter defenses and endpoint security solutions, assuming that a robust TIP is not a primary requirement for meeting U.S. cybersecurity compliance mandates. Option D. Begin manually collecting and correlating threat indicators from various open-source intelligence feeds and internal logs, without the aid of a dedicated threat intelligence platform, to reduce immediate costs. Correct answer is B. Implement a threat intelligence platform, TIP, and integrate it with existing security tools, establishing clear workflows for ingesting, analyzing, and disseminating threat data to relevant stakeholders and incident response teams, while ensuring data handling aligns with U.S. privacy regulations. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential gap in the organization's ability to proactively defend against emerging cyber threats. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a security analyst to not only understand the technical capabilities of a threat intelligence platform, TIP, but also to align its implementation and usage with relevant U.S. regulatory frameworks, specifically those pertaining to data protection and incident reporting. The analyst must demonstrate a nuanced understanding of how TIPs contribute to compliance by enabling timely threat identification, risk assessment, and informed response, thereby mitigating potential regulatory penalties and reputational damage. Correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the audit's concern by leveraging the TIP to enhance the organization's security posture in a manner consistent with U.S. cybersecurity regulations. By integrating the TIP with existing security tools and establishing clear processes for threat data ingestion, analysis, and dissemination, the organization can achieve a more robust and compliant security program. This proactive stance ensures that the organization can meet its obligations under regulations like NIST Cybersecurity Framework, which emphasizes threat intelligence as a critical component of cybersecurity risk management, and potentially other sector-specific regulation that mandate timely threat awareness and mitigation. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the technical features of the TIP without considering its integration into the broader compliance and operational framework would be professionally unacceptable. This failure would represent a significant regulatory and ethical lapse, as it would mean the organization is not effectively utilizing its resources to meet its legal and ethical obligations to protect sensitive data and systems. For instance, a failure to establish clear data handling policies for threat intelligence, especially if it contains personally identifiable information, PI, could violate the spirit and letter of regulations like the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, or HIPAA, leading to substantial fines and legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach, such as neglecting to document the TIP's operational procedures and its role in incident response, would undermine auditability and accountability, making it difficult to demonstrate compliance during future regulatory reviews. This lack of documentation is a common pitfall that can lead to non-compliance and a failure to demonstrate due diligence. Professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the audit findings against established regulatory requirements and organizational policies. The analyst should first identify the specific regulatory obligations that the TIP can help fulfill. Then, they should assess the current state of TIP implementation and identify any gaps in its technical capabilities or operational integration. Finally, the analyst must develop a remediation plan that prioritizes actions based on their impact on compliance, risk reduction, and operational efficiency, ensuring that all proposed solutions are justifiable within the relevant legal and ethical landscape. Question 7. Operational review demonstrates that the cybersecurity team has identified a significant number of potential vulnerabilities across the organization's network. The team is under pressure to provide a comprehensive report of these vulnerabilities to management within a tight deadline. Which of the following approaches would best balance the need for thoroughness with the imperative to maintain operational stability and meet regulatory expectations? Option A. Prioritize scanning efforts by focusing exclusively on external-facing systems and those that have recently experienced performance degradation, as these are the most likely entry points or indicators of compromise. Option B. Conduct a phased vulnerability assessment, beginning with non-production environments to refine scanning methodologies and identify potential impacts, followed by carefully scheduled, low-impact scans of production systems during off-peak hours with clear communication and rollback plans. Option C. Defer the vulnerability assessment until a period of low organizational activity, such as a holiday weekend, to ensure no disruption to business operations, even if this significantly delays the reporting of critical findings. Option D. Initiate an immediate full-spectrum network scan of all systems, including critical production servers, during standard business hours to capture all potential vulnerabilities without delay. The correct answer is D. Initiate an immediate full-spectrum network scan of all systems, including critical production servers, during standard business hours to capture all potential vulnerabilities without delay. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for comprehensive vulnerability assessment with the operational realities of a production environment. The challenge lies in identifying vulnerabilities without causing disruption to critical business functions, which could lead to financial losses, reputational damage, and regulatory noncompliance. The pressure to deliver findings quickly must be tempered by the need for accuracy and minimal impact. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased, risk-based vulnerability assessment strategy. This begins with a thorough understanding of the network architecture, critical assets, and business processes. It then prioritizes scanning activities based on the criticality of systems and the potential impact of a compromise. Non-production environments are scanned first to refine methodologies and identify potential issues without affecting live services. For production systems, carefully scheduled, low-impact scans are conducted during off-peak hours, with clear communication and rollback plans in place. This approach aligns with best practices for operational security and risk management, aiming to identify and mitigate threats proactively while maintaining business continuity. From a regulatory perspective, this demonstrates due diligence in protecting sensitive data and systems, which is often a requirement under frameworks like NIST, which CompTIA CySA Plus aligns with, and general data protection principles. Incorrect approach is analysis. Conducting a full, unannounced network-wide scan during peak business hours is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a lack of understanding of operational impact and could lead to system outages, violating service-level agreements, and potentially data breach notification requirements if data becomes inaccessible or corrupted. This approach shows negligence in risk assessment and mitigation. Performing vulnerability scans only on systems that have recently reported performance issues ignores a vast attack surface and a significant portion of potential vulnerabilities. This reactive approach is insufficient for proactive security and fails to meet the standard of care expected in a comprehensive vulnerability management program, potentially violating compliance mandates that require regular and thorough assessments of all relevant systems. Focusing solely on external-facing systems and neglecting internal network vulnerabilities is another critical failure. Many sophisticated attacks originate internally or leverage compromised internal systems. A comprehensive assessment must cover both, and neglecting internal threats leaves the organization exposed, violating the principle of defense in depth, and potentially failing to meet regulatory requirements for internal security controls. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, phased approach to vulnerability assessment. This involves 1. Understanding the environment, map critical assets, business processes, and dependencies. 2. Prioritization, identify systems and data most critical to the organization's mission and most likely to be targeted. 3. Planning and scheduling, develop a detailed plan for scanning including scope, timing, and expected impact. Prioritize non-production environments. 4. Communication, inform relevant stakeholders about planned assessments, especially for production systems. 5. Execution, conduct scans using appropriate tools and techniques, minimizing impact on live operations. 6. Reporting and remediation, document findings clearly and work with IT teams to prioritize and remediate vulnerabilities. 7. Continuous improvement, regularly review and refine the vulnerability assessment process. Question 8. The evaluation methodology shows a critical need to prioritize the remediation of identified vulnerabilities. Given a list of CVEs, which approach best aligns with a risk-based security strategy for an organization operating under U.S. regulatory frameworks that emphasize reasonable security measures? Option A. Prioritize patching based on the CVSS score alone, addressing the highest scores first. Option B. Defer patching of vulnerabilities with a CVSS score below 7.0 unless they are actively exploited within the organization's network. Option C. Focus remediation efforts on vulnerabilities that are actively being exploited in the wild and have a high potential impact on critical business assets. Option D. Implement a policy to patch all identified CVEs immediately, regardless of their severity or exploitability, to ensure comprehensive coverage. The correct answer is A. Prioritize patching based on the CVSS score alone, addressing the highest scores first. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a critical need for a structured approach to vulnerability management, especially when dealing with publicly disclosed vulnerabilities like CVEs. The challenge lies in prioritizing remediation efforts effectively within an organization's specific risk tolerance and operational constraints. This requires a deep understanding of not just the technical severity of a vulnerability, but also its potential impact on business operations and the likelihood of exploitation within the organization's environment. The correct approach involves a systematic process of identifying, assessing, and prioritizing vulnerabilities based on their potential impact and exploitability. This aligns with best practices in cybersecurity risk management, which are implicitly supported by regulatory frameworks that mandate reasonable security measures to protect sensitive data and systems. By correlating CVEs with active exploit information, and then mapping these to the organization's critical assets, security teams can make informed decisions about which vulnerabilities pose the most immediate threat and require urgent attention. This proactive and risk-based methodology ensures that resources are allocated efficiently to mitigate the most significant risks, thereby demonstrating due diligence and a commitment to maintaining a secure posture. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the CVSS score without considering other contextual factors. While CVSS provides a standardized measure of severity, it does not account for the specific threat landscape an organization faces, or the actual business impact of a compromise. This could lead to misallocation of resources, focusing on vulnerabilities that are technically severe but unlikely to be exploited against the organization, while neglecting those that are more easily exploitable and could have a devastating impact. Ethically, this failure to adequately assess and prioritize risks could be seen as a dereliction of duty, potentially leading to breaches that could have been prevented. Another incorrect approach is to ignore vulnerabilities that have a lower CVSS score, even if they are actively being exploited in the wild. This overlooks the dynamic nature of the threat landscape and the possibility of zero-day exploits or targeted attacks that may not be reflected in a static CVSS score. Such an approach fails to demonstrate a proactive security stance and could leave the organization vulnerable to known, albeit less severe, attack vectors. This could be viewed as a failure to implement reasonable security controls, potentially violating regulatory expectations for maintaining a secure environment. Finally, an approach that focuses only on patching all identified CVEs without any form of prioritization or risk assessment is also flawed. While comprehensive patching is a goal, an unprioritized approach can overwhelm security teams, lead to operational disruptions due to untested patches, and still fail to address the most critical risks first. This inefficient use of resources can be seen as a failure to manage risk effectively, which is a fundamental expectation in cybersecurity. Professionals should adopt a risk-based decision-making process. This involves 1. Comprehensive asset inventory and classification to understand what needs protection. 2. Continuous vulnerability scanning and threat intelligence gathering to identify potential weaknesses and active threats. 3. Vulnerability assessment, correlating technical severity e.g. CVSS with exploitability and business impact. 4. Prioritization of remediation based on this risk assessment. 5. Timely and effective remediation, followed by verification. This structured approach ensures that security efforts are aligned with business objectives and regulatory expectations. Question 9. Consider a scenario where a cybersecurity team receives intelligence about a novel, sophisticated phishing campaign targeting their industry. This campaign appears to be designed to exfiltrate sensitive customer data, which NIST Cybersecurity Framework (CSF) function should be the primary focus for the team's initial actions to effectively address this emerging threat. Option A, protect. Option B, identify. Option C, respond. Option D, detect. The correct answer is B, identify. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity, balancing proactive risk management with reactive incident response. The professional challenge lies in effectively integrating the NIST Cybersecurity Framework (CSF) functions to ensure comprehensive security posture. A critical judgment is required to determine which CSF function is the most appropriate initial focus when a new, potentially significant threat emerges. The correct approach prioritizes the NIST CSF's identify function. This aligns with best professional practice because understanding the threat landscape, including potential vulnerabilities and assets at risk, is the foundational step for all subsequent security actions. Without a clear understanding of what needs protection and what the threats are, the protect, detect, respond, and recover functions cannot be effectively implemented. This proactive identification of risks is a cornerstone of effective cybersecurity management and is implicitly supported by regulatory frameworks that emphasize risk assessment and management. An incorrect approach that immediately focuses on the protect function without prior identification is professionally unacceptable. This would lead to misallocation of resources, potentially protecting the wrong assets or implementing controls that are ineffective against the specific threat. It bypasses the crucial risk assessment phase, which is a regulatory expectation in many cybersecurity compliance standards, leading to a failure in due diligence. Another incorrect approach that jumps directly to the respond function without adequate identification or protection measures is also professionally flawed. This reactive stance, while necessary during an active incident, is not the optimal initial strategy for a newly identified threat. It suggests a lack of preparedness and a failure to implement preventative controls, which can have significant regulatory and ethical implications, particularly concerning the duty of care to protect data and systems. Focusing solely on the detect function without first identifying what to detect or protect is also an inadequate initial response. While detection is vital, it needs to be informed by an understanding of potential threats and critical assets. Implementing detection mechanisms without this context can lead to alert fatigue and missed critical events, failing to meet the expected standard of care in cybersecurity. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic application of the NIST CSF. When faced with a new threat, the first step is always to leverage the identify function to understand the nature of the threat, its potential impact, and the assets it might target. This informs the subsequent implementation of the protect function to build defenses, the detect function to monitor for intrusions, and the respond and recover functions to manage incidents when they occur. This structured, risk-based approach ensures that security efforts are targeted, efficient, and compliant with best practices and regulatory expectations. Question 10. The investigation demonstrates that a new malware variant is being discussed across various OSINT forums. A commercial threat feed has flagged it as high risk, and internal network logs show unusual outbound traffic patterns consistent with known command and control (C2) communication. What is the most appropriate next step to assess the potential impact of this threat on the organization? Option A. Immediately isolate all systems exhibiting unusual outbound traffic based on the commercial threat feed's high-risk designation. Option B. Correlate the OSINT discussions, commercial feed alerts, and internal log data to identify specific affected systems, the nature of the outbound traffic, and the potential data exfiltration or system compromise. Option C. Focus solely on the OSINT discussions to understand the general capabilities of the malware and assume a broad impact across the organization. Option D. Prioritize investigating the commercial threat feeds, alert as the definitive source of impact information, and disregard internal logs, unless they directly corroborate the feed's findings. The correct answer is B. Correlate the OSINT discussions, commercial feed alerts, and internal log data to identify specific affected systems, the nature of the outbound traffic, and the potential data exfiltration or system compromise. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a common challenge in cybersecurity, correlating disparate threat intelligence sources to accurately assess the impact of a potential incident. The difficulty lies in synthesizing information from open-source intelligence OSINT, commercial threat feeds, and internal data, each with varying levels of detail, reliability, and timeliness. Professionals must navigate potential noise, false positives, and the sheer volume of data to identify genuine threats and their potential consequences. This requires a structured approach to impact assessment that prioritizes actionable intelligence and aligns with organizational risk tolerance. The correct approach involves systematically evaluating the potential impact of the identified threat by considering its relevance to the organization's assets, the likelihood of successful exploitation, and the potential business disruption. This aligns with best professional practices by focusing on a risk-based methodology, which is implicitly supported by general cybersecurity principles and frameworks that emphasize proactive risk management and incident preparedness. While specific U.S. regulations like NIST SB 800-53 or the Cybersecurity Enhancement Act of 2015 don't dictate a single impact assessment methodology, they mandate risk assessment and management, making a structured, evidence-based impact evaluation a professional imperative. This approach ensures that resources are allocated effectively to mitigate the most significant risks. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the volume of mentions in OSINT, without verifying the threat's applicability or severity to the organization. This fails to meet professional standards by potentially overreacting to low-impact or irrelevant information, leading to wasted resources and a lack of focus on genuine threats. Ethically, it could lead to unnecessary alarm or misallocation of security efforts. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss a threat solely because it originates from internal data, without a thorough analysis of its potential implications. This ignores the possibility of insider threats or misconfigurations that could have significant impacts, violating the principle of comprehensive threat assessment. Furthermore, prioritizing commercial threat feed alerts without cross-referencing with internal data, or OSINT, can lead to a skewed understanding of the threat landscape, potentially missing critical context or internal vulnerabilities. This approach lacks due diligence and a holistic view of the organization's security posture. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with defining the scope of the investigation and the organization's critical assets. They should then gather intelligence from all specified sources, critically evaluating the credibility and relevance of each piece of information. The next step is to correlate findings, looking for patterns and corroboration across different intelligence streams. Finally, a structured impact assessment should be performed, considering the potential technical, operational, and financial consequences before determining the appropriate response. This systematic process ensures that decisions are data-driven, risk-informed, and aligned with organizational objectives and regulatory expectations. Question 11. Upon reviewing the current security posture of a financial services organization operating under U.S. federal regulations, a cybersecurity analyst identified several potential gaps in technical controls. The organization currently relies heavily on perimeter firewalls and endpoint antivirus software to protect sensitive customer data. The analyst is tasked with recommending improvements to enhance the organization's security and ensure compliance with relevant U.S. data protection laws. Which of the following approaches would best address these identified gaps and align with regulatory expectations for a comprehensive security program? Option A. Implement a layered security strategy that integrates firewalls, intrusion detection/prevention systems, IDs/IPS, endpoint detection and response (EDR), security information and event management, SIEM systems, and data loss prevention (DLP) solutions, with a focus on centralized logging and analysis. Option B. Deploy an intrusion detection/prevention system, IDs/IPS, and configure it to automatically block suspicious traffic without establishing a centralized logging or monitoring system. Option C. Enhance the existing firewall rule sets and increase the frequency of antivirus signature updates to provide a more robust defense against emerging threats. Option D. Implement a data loss prevention (DLP) solution and configure it to flag any outbound email containing more than 5 email addresses without further analysis of the content sensitivity. The correct answer is A. Implement a layered security strategy that integrates firewalls, intrusion detection/prevention systems, IDs/IPS, endpoint detection and response (EDR), security information and event management, SIEM systems, and data loss prevention (DLP) solutions, with a focus on centralized logging and analysis. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity, balancing the need for robust technical controls with the operational realities of a business. The challenge lies in selecting and implementing controls that not only meet regulatory compliance requirements, but also effectively mitigate identified risks without unduly hindering legitimate business operations. The pressure to demonstrate compliance to auditors while ensuring business continuity requires a nuanced understanding of both technical capabilities and organizational impact. Correct approach analysis. Implementing a layered security approach that integrates multiple technical controls, such as firewalls, IDs/IPS, antivirus/anti-malware, EDR, SIEM, and DLP, is the best professional practice. This approach aligns with the principle of defense in depth, which is a fundamental tenet of cybersecurity, and is implicitly or explicitly supported by various U.S. regulatory frameworks like NIST Cybersecurity Framework and HIPAA Security Rule. These frameworks emphasize the need for multiple, overlapping security control to protect sensitive data and systems. A SIEM system is crucial for aggregating and analyzing logs from these various controls, enabling faster detection and response to threats. DLP ensures that sensitive data is not exfiltrated, and EDR provides advanced threat detection and response capabilities at the endpoint level. This comprehensive strategy provides a more resilient security posture than relying on a single control. Incorrect approach is analysis, focusing solely on firewall and antivirus solutions, while foundational is insufficient. This approach fails to address more sophisticated threats that can bypass perimeter defenses or exploit endpoint vulnerabilities. Many U.S. regulations, such as those governing financial institutions, e.g., GLBA, or healthcare, e.g., HIPAA, mandate more than just basic perimeter security and endpoint protection, requiring measures for data integrity, availability, and confidentiality beyond these two controls. This oversight represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure to adequately protect sensitive information. Implementing an IDS/IPS without a SIEM to monitor its alerts is a common but flawed strategy. The IDS/IPS can detect and potentially block threats. The lack of centralized logging and analysis means that critical security events might go unnoticed or uninvestigated. This can lead to missed incidents, delayed response, and ultimately, non-compliance with regulations that require timely incident detection and reporting. The ethical failure lies in deploying a tool without the necessary infrastructure to derive its full benefit, leaving the organization vulnerable. Deploying DLP without proper configuration and ongoing monitoring is also problematic. DLP tools are designed to prevent sensitive data from leaving the organization, but if they are not correctly tuned to identify what constitutes sensitive data, or if their alerts are not actively reviewed, they can be ineffective. This can lead to regulatory violations, particularly under data privacy laws like CCPA, where organizations are responsible for protecting personal information. The ethical lapse is in creating a false sense of security by implementing a control that is not effectively operationalized. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, starting with a thorough risk assessment to identify critical assets and potential threats. This assessment should inform the selection and prioritization of technical controls. Compliance requirements should be mapped to these controls, ensuring that the chosen solutions meet both security and regulatory obligations. A defense-in-depth strategy, leveraging a combination of controls, is generally recommended. Regular testing, monitoring, and tuning of all security controls, supported by a robust SIEM, are essential for maintaining an effective security posture and demonstrating ongoing compliance. Professionals must also consider the operational impact of controls and strive for solutions that balance security with business needs. Question 12. The audit findings indicate a need to improve the organization's cybersecurity posture by implementing several recommendations derived from the CIS controls. Given limited resources and personnel, which approach best aligns with a strategic and effective implementation of these controls? Option A. Focus on implementing the technically most complex CIS controls first, as these are often perceived as the most advanced and comprehensive. Option B. Defer all CIS control implementation until a complete, top-to-bottom redesign of the entire IT infrastructure can be undertaken. Option C. Prioritize the implementation of foundational CIS controls that address basic cyber hygiene and asset management before addressing more advanced controls. Option D. Address only the CIS controls that require the least amount of effort and resources to implement, regardless of their impact on overall security. Correct answer is C. Prioritize the implementation of foundational CIS controls that address basic cyber hygiene and asset management before addressing more advanced controls. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires prioritizing limited resources and expertise to address a broad set of cybersecurity recommendations. The audit findings highlight a need for improvement across multiple areas. But without a clear framework for prioritization, the organization risks inefficient allocation of efforts, potentially leaving critical vulnerabilities unaddressed. The CompTIA CySA Plus exam emphasizes practical application of cybersecurity principles, including the strategic implementation of controls. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly aligns with the principles of the CIS controls. The CIS controls are designed to be a prioritized set of actions that organizations can take to improve their cybersecurity posture. By focusing on the foundational safeguards first, the organization ensures that the most critical and impactful security measures are implemented. This aligns with the concept of building a strong security baseline before moving to more advanced controls, which is a fundamental tenet of effective cybersecurity strategy and is implicitly supported by the practical, risk-based approach advocated in cybersecurity best practices and certifications like CySA+. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the most technically complex controls without regard for foundational security is professionally unacceptable. This would be a failure to apply a risk-based methodology, potentially leading to wasted resources on controls that cannot be effectively implemented or maintained without basic security hygiene. It also ignores the prioritized nature of the CIS controls, which are designed to provide the greatest impact for the effort invested. Another incorrect approach that solely addresses the findings with the lowest implementation effort, regardless of their impact on overall security, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of strategic thinking and a failure to understand the risk landscape. While ease of implementation is a factor, it should not be the sole determinant of prioritization. This approach could lead to addressing minor issues while leaving significant threats unmitigated, which is a dereliction of professional duty. Finally, an approach that delays implementation until a comprehensive, organization-wide security overhaul is feasible is professionally unsound. Cybersecurity is an ongoing process, not a one-time project. Delaying action based on the aspiration of a perfect future state is a recipe for continued vulnerability. Best professional practice dictates iterative improvement and continuous adaptation to the evolving threat landscape. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the audit findings and their implications. 2. Consulting established frameworks like the CIS controls for guidance on prioritization. 3. Assessing the risk and impact of each identified vulnerability or control gap. 4. Considering resource constraints, budget, personnel, time. 5. Developing a phased implementation plan that addresses foundational controls first, followed by more advanced measures. 6. Regularly reviewing and updating the security strategy based on new threats and organizational changes. Question 13. Examination of the data shows that a development team is under pressure to release a new application feature rapidly. To meet the deadline, the team is considering skipping detailed security code reviews and delaying comprehensive security testing until after the feature is deployed to production. Which of the following approaches best aligns with Secure Software Development Lifecycle, SDLC, best practices and regulatory expectations in the United States? Option A. Integrate security testing and code reviews at multiple stages of the SDLC, including design, coding, and pre-deployment, even if it requires a slight adjustment to the initial timeline. Option B. Defer all security testing until after the feature has been released to production, prioritizing speed of delivery above all else. Option C. Conduct security code reviews only for critical components and postpone comprehensive security testing until a significant number of users have adopted the new feature. Option D. Focus primarily on penetration testing immediately after the feature is deployed to identify and address any security weaknesses. The correct answer is A. Integrate security testing and code reviews at multiple stages of the SDLC, including design, coding, and pre-deployment, even if it requires a slight adjustment to the initial timeline. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in software development, balancing rapid deployment with robust security. The pressure to release new features quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise the integrity of the software development lifecycle, SDLC. Professionals must exercise careful judgment to ensure that security is not an afterthought but is integrated throughout the entire SDLC, from initial design to deployment and maintenance. The correct approach emphasizes integrating security testing and code reviews at multiple stages of the SDLC. This aligns with best practices for secure software development, which are implicitly supported by various U.S. cybersecurity frameworks and regulations that mandate risk management and due diligence in protecting sensitive data. For instance, the NIST cybersecurity framework, while not a regulation itself, provides a widely adopted set of guidelines that promote a proactive security posture throughout the lifecycle. By incorporating security into each phase, potential vulnerabilities are identified and remediated early, reducing the cost and impact of breaches. This proactive stance is ethically sound as it demonstrates a commitment to protecting users and their data. An incorrect approach that delays security testing until the final stages of deployment is professionally unacceptable. This represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Such a delay means that vulnerabilities might be deeply embedded in the codebase, making them harder and more expensive to fix. This could lead to noncompliance with data protection regulations like HIPAA, if health data is involved, or PCI DSS, if payment card data is handled, resulting in substantial fines and reputational damage. Ethically, it demonstrates negligence in safeguarding user information, potentially exposing individuals to harm. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on penetration testing after deployment, also falls short. Penetration testing is a valuable component of security. Relying on it as the primary security measure after deployment is reactive rather than proactive. It fails to address vulnerabilities that could have been prevented during the design and coding phases. This approach can be seen as a failure to implement reasonable security measures, which could be a violation of due diligence requirements under various U.S. laws. Ethically, it suggests a lack of commitment to building secure systems from the ground up. Finally, an approach that prioritizes feature development over addressing identified security flaws, even minor ones, is also professionally unsound. This demonstrates a disregard for security best practices and a potential violation of internal security policies and potentially external regulatory expectations for risk management. It creates technical debt and increases the likelihood of future security incidents. Ethically, it prioritizes business expediency over the safety and security of the software and its users. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that embeds security into every phase of the SDLC. This involves establishing clear security requirements, conducting threat modeling during design, implementing secure coding standards, performing regular code reviews and static/dynamic analysis, and integrating security testing into the continuous integration and continuous deployment (CI/CD) pipeline. This proactive, defense-in-depth strategy is the most effective way to build secure software and comply with the spirit and letter of relevant U.S. cybersecurity guidelines and regulations. Question 14. Performance analysis shows that an organization is facing two distinct potential threats: a sophisticated external advanced persistent threat (APT) group with a history of financial cybercrime, and a recently terminated employee who has expressed grievances and possesses intimate knowledge of the organization's internal systems. Which of the following approaches to threat analysis would be most effective in guiding the organization's security strategy? Option A. Focus exclusively on developing advanced network intrusion detection and prevention systems to counter the external APT, as their financial motivation suggests a high likelihood of a sophisticated attack. Option B. Prioritize the development of comprehensive internal monitoring and access control mechanisms, as the disgruntled insider poses an immediate and unpredictable threat due to their personal motivations. Option C. Conduct a detailed analysis of both the external APT and the insider threat, identifying their specific actors, motivations, and likely attack vectors to tailor distinct mitigation strategies for each. Option D. Implement a broad, generic security awareness training program for all employees, assuming that a well-informed workforce is the primary defense against all types of threats. The correct answer is A. Focus exclusively on developing advanced network intrusion detection and prevention systems to counter the external APT, as their financial motivation suggests a high likelihood of a sophisticated attack. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the analyst to move beyond simply identifying technical vulnerabilities to understanding the human and strategic elements behind potential attacks. The organization faces a dual threat: an external sophisticated actor with clear financial motivations, and an internal disgruntled employee with a more personal, potentially less predictable, motivation. Balancing the need for robust external defense with the equally critical internal security measures, while also considering the potential for insider threats, demands a nuanced and comprehensive threat analysis. The challenge lies in prioritizing resources and mitigation strategies effectively across these diverse threat landscapes. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it aligns with the principles of comprehensive risk management and proactive security. By focusing on identifying the specific threat actors, external APT, disgruntled insider, and their motivations, financial gain, revenge/sabotage, the organization can tailor its defenses. This allows for the development of targeted security controls, such as enhanced network segmentation and intrusion detection for the external threat, and stricter access controls, monitoring, and HR collaboration for the internal threat. This approach is ethically sound as it aims to protect the organization and its stakeholders from harm by addressing the root causes of potential threats. It also implicitly supports compliance with general cybersecurity best practices that emphasize understanding the threat landscape to inform security investments, which is a foundational element of many regulatory frameworks, even if not explicitly named in a specific U.S. regulation for this exam context. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the external advanced persistent threat, APT, due to its perceived sophistication and financial motivation. This fails to acknowledge the significant risk posed by insider threats, which can often bypass perimeter defenses and cause substantial damage. Ethically, Neglecting a known internal threat actor is a failure to protect the organization and its data adequately. This approach also represents a regulatory failure by not adhering to a holistic security posture, which is often a requirement for compliance with data protection and cybersecurity standards. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize the disgruntled insider threat due to the immediate emotional element, while downplaying the external APT. While insider threats are serious, ignoring a well-resourced external actor with a clear financial motive could lead to a catastrophic breach that the organization is unprepared for. This selective focus is professionally unsound, as it creates blind spots in the security strategy. It also represents an ethical lapse by not dedicating sufficient resources to defend against all credible threats. A potential regulatory failure if specific data protection mandates are not fully addressed due to this unbalanced prioritization. A third incorrect approach would be to treat both threats identically without differentiating their actors' motivations or likely attack vectors. This one-size-fits-all mentality is inefficient and ineffective. It leads to misallocation of resources, potentially overinvesting in defenses irrelevant to one threat while underdefending against the other. Professionally, this demonstrates a lack of analytical depth. Ethically, it fails to provide the most appropriate protection for the organization's assets. From a compliance perspective, it can lead to non-compliance with regulations that require risk-based security measures tailored to specific threat profiles. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured threat analysis process that begins with broad threat identification, followed by detailed actor and motivation analysis. This involves gathering intelligence from various sources, including technical logs, threat intelligence feeds, and internal HR and security reports. The next step is to assess the likelihood and potential impact of each identified threat. Based on this assessment, a prioritized list of threats should be developed, guiding the allocation of security resources and the implementation of appropriate mitigation strategies. This iterative process ensures that security efforts are focused on the most significant risks, aligning with both professional best practices and regulatory expectations for due diligence in cybersecurity. Question 15. Compliance review shows that a required access control mechanism designed to prevent unauthorized access to sensitive data cannot be fully implemented due to legacy system limitations. The organization must still meet the regulatory intent of protecting this data. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Document the limitation and proceed with the partial implementation of the access control mechanism, with no further compensatory measures. Option B. Request a waiver from the regulatory body without proposing any alternative security measures, citing the legacy system constraints. Option C. Deploy a new, unrelated security tool that offers advanced threat detection capabilities, assuming it will indirectly improve overall security posture. Option D. Implement enhanced logging and monitoring of access attempts to the sensitive data, coupled with stricter user access reviews and a documented exception process for any deviations. The correct answer is D. Implement enhanced logging and monitoring of access attempts to the sensitive data, coupled with stricter user access reviews and a documented exception process for any deviations. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity compliance, a critical security control mandated by regulations like NIST SB 800-53, as often referenced in CompTIA CySA plus contexts for U.S. federal systems, is found to be technically infeasible to implement fully within the current infrastructure. The challenge lies in balancing regulatory adherence with operational realities and risk management. Professionals must identify alternative measures that provide equivalent or near-equivalent protection without violating the spirit or letter of the law. The correct approach involves implementing compensating controls that directly address the risks the original control was designed to mitigate. This demonstrates a proactive and risk-aware posture, aligning with the principles of cybersecurity best practices and regulatory frameworks that emphasize achieving security objectives rather than rigidly adhering to specific implementation methods when those methods are impractical. Such an approach requires a thorough risk assessment to ensure the compensating controls are effective and documented to satisfy auditors and regulators. Implementing a control that is not directly related to the identified risk, or one that introduces new vulnerabilities, is professionally unacceptable. It fails to address the core security requirement and can lead to a false sense of security, increasing the organization's exposure. Similarly, ignoring the non-compliance and hoping it goes unnoticed is a severe ethical and regulatory failure, potentially leading to significant penalties and reputational damage. Relying on a control that is only partially implemented without a documented plan to address the remaining gaps also represents a failure to manage risk effectively and comply with regulatory expectations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific regulatory requirement and the underlying security objective. This is followed by a comprehensive risk assessment to identify the threats and vulnerabilities the original control was meant to address. Next, explore potential alternative controls, evaluating their effectiveness, feasibility, and cost. Document the chosen compensating controls, the rationale for their selection, and the residual risks. Finally, establish a plan for ongoing monitoring and periodic reevaluation of the compensating controls' effectiveness. Question 16. Analysis of how to optimize the security awareness training program to better align with identified organizational risks, considering the need for process efficiency and cost-effectiveness within a U.S. regulatory context. Option A. Eliminate security awareness training for departments that have not experienced a security incident in the past year, based on the assumption of lower risk. Option B. Reduce the frequency of mandatory security awareness training sessions for all employees to cut down on administrative overhead and associated costs. Option C. Integrate findings from recent risk assessments and incident reports directly into the content and delivery methods of the security awareness training program. Option D. Replace all customized training modules with a single, comprehensive, generic online course that covers broad cybersecurity principles. The correct answer is C. Integrate findings from recent risk assessments and incident reports directly into the content and delivery methods of the security awareness training program. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity management, optimizing existing processes for risk management and security awareness training. The professional difficulty lies in balancing the need for efficiency and cost-effectiveness with the imperative to maintain robust security posture and compliance. Simply cutting corners or adopting a superficial approach can lead to significant security gaps, regulatory noncompliance, and increased risk exposure. Careful judgment is required to identify improvements that genuinely enhance security without compromising operational effectiveness or budget constraints. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach focuses on integrating risk assessment findings directly into the security awareness training program. This represents best professional practice because it ensures that training is targeted, relevant, and addresses the most critical threats and vulnerabilities identified by the organization. By aligning training with identified risks, resources are used more effectively, and employees receive education on issues that directly impact their roles and the organization's security. This proactive and data-driven approach aligns with the principles of effective risk management and demonstrates a commitment to continuous improvement in security posture, which is often a requirement or strong recommendation within regulatory frameworks like those implied by CompTIA CySA+, which focuses on U.S.-centric cybersecurity best practices and frameworks. This approach optimizes the training process by making it more impactful and efficient. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves reducing the frequency of security awareness training without a corresponding reassessment of risks. This is professionally unacceptable because it creates a false sense of security while potentially leaving employees unprepared for evolving threats. Regulatory frameworks often mandate regular and effective security awareness training, and reducing its frequency without justification can be seen as a failure to meet these requirements, increasing the likelihood of security incidents and potential penalties. Another incorrect approach is to solely rely on generic, off-the-shelf training modules that do not address the organization's specific risks or operational environment. This is professionally unsound, as it fails to provide tailored guidance, making the training less effective and potentially irrelevant to employees' daily tasks. This can lead to a lack of engagement and a failure to internalize security best practices, thereby increasing the organization's vulnerability to targeted attacks. Ethically, it represents a failure to adequately protect the organization and its stakeholders by not providing the most pertinent security education. A further incorrect approach is to prioritize cost savings by eliminating training entirely for certain departments deemed low risk, without a thorough, documented risk assessment. This is a critical regulatory and ethical failure. Risk is dynamic, and any department can become a target or a vector for attack. Eliminating training based on a subjective or incomplete assessment is a direct contravention of prudent risk management principles and can lead to significant security breaches, reputational damage, and legal liabilities. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence in protecting organizational assets. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach process optimization by first conducting a comprehensive review of existing risk assessments and incident reports. This data should then be used to identify areas where security awareness training is weakest or where specific threats are most prevalent. The next step is to evaluate the effectiveness of current training programs against these identified risks. Improvements should be prioritized based on their potential impact on reducing risk and enhancing compliance. This iterative process of assessment, alignment, and refinement ensures that managerial controls, particularly risk management and security awareness training, are optimized for effectiveness and efficiency, rather than simply being reduced for cost savings. Question 17. The audit findings indicate a consistent delay in patching identified vulnerabilities, with a tendency to address only those flagged as critical. Which of the following approaches best aligns with a mature vulnerability lifecycle management process for ensuring comprehensive security? Option A. Deploy automated patching solutions across all systems without prior testing or validation to ensure rapid deployment. Option B. Implement a risk-based prioritization system that categorizes vulnerabilities based on severity, exploitability, and potential impact on critical assets, with defined remediation timelines for each category. Option C. Focus exclusively on remediating vulnerabilities with a CVSS score of 9, 0 or higher, deferring all others until a significant backlog accumulates. Option D. Prioritize remediation efforts based on the number of vulnerabilities found in a specific system, regardless of their individual risk profile. Correct answer is B. Implement a risk-based prioritization system that categorizes vulnerabilities based on severity, exploitability, and potential impact on critical assets, with defined remediation timelines for each category. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a recurring pattern of delayed vulnerability remediation, impacting the organization's security posture. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the urgency of security fixes with operational constraints, resource allocation, and the need for thorough testing to avoid introducing new issues. Effective vulnerability lifecycle management is crucial for maintaining compliance and mitigating risk. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it establishes a structured, repeatable process for managing vulnerabilities from discovery through remediation. This aligns with the principles of proactive security management and risk reduction, which are implicitly or explicitly supported by various cybersecurity frameworks and best practices that CompTIA CySA Plus exams are based upon. A defined process ensures that vulnerabilities are tracked, prioritized, and addressed in a timely manner, minimizing the window of exposure. This systematic approach also facilitates reporting and demonstrates due diligence to auditors and stakeholders. An incorrect approach that prioritizes only high-severity vulnerabilities without considering their exploitability or potential impact on critical assets is professionally unacceptable. This failure can lead to overlooking significant risks that, while not immediately critical, could be exploited in combination or over time to cause substantial damage. It also fails to adhere to a comprehensive vulnerability management strategy, potentially violating internal policies or industry best practices that mandate addressing all identified risks within defined timelines. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on automated patching without human oversight and validation is professionally unsound. While automation is valuable, it can lead to unintended consequences, such as system instability or service disruption if patches are not properly tested in the environment. This can result in a greater negative impact than the original vulnerability, undermining the remediation effort and potentially violating service-level agreements or operational requirements. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence in the remediation process. Finally, an approach that delays remediation, until a significant number of vulnerabilities accumulate before initiating a large-scale cleanup is professionally negligent. This strategy increases the overall risk exposure of the organization by allowing multiple weaknesses to persist for extended periods. It also makes the remediation process more complex and time-consuming, increasing the likelihood of errors and missed vulnerabilities. This reactive approach is contrary to the proactive security posture expected of cybersecurity professionals. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the organization's risk tolerance and business objectives. 2. Establishing clear policies and procedures for vulnerability management, including prioritization criteria and remediation timelines. 3. Implementing a robust vulnerability scanning and assessment program. 4. Ensuring effective communication and collaboration between security, IT operations, and development teams. 5. Regularly reviewing and updating the vulnerability management program based on threat intelligence and audit findings. Question 18. Cost-benefit analysis shows that investing in advanced threat intelligence platforms is a significant expenditure, but a recent surge in sophisticated phishing attempts, evidenced by specific IOCs like unusual email headers and malicious URL patterns, suggests a potential for substantial business disruption. Given these indicators, which of the following actions best balances immediate incident response with long-term security posture improvement, adhering to U.S. cybersecurity principles? Option A. Prioritize correlating the detected IOCs with known adversary TTPs to understand the attack methodology, assess the potential impact on critical assets, and then tailor remediation and defensive measures accordingly. Option B. Focus on collecting a wider array of IOCs from various sources, assuming that more data will eventually reveal the nature of the threat, and postpone any significant response actions until a definitive threat actor is identified. Option C. Immediately deploy broad network-wide security patches and initiate a full system scan to identify any compromised assets, deferring detailed analysis of the IOCs until the immediate threat is contained. Option D. Initiate a reactive security awareness training campaign for all employees, emphasizing the dangers of phishing, without further technical investigation into the specific IOCs or their potential impact. The correct answer is C. Immediately deploy broad network-wide security patches and initiate a full system scan to identify any compromised assets, deferring detailed analysis of the IOCs until the immediate threat is contained. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need to respond to a potential security incident with the long-term strategic goal of improving threat intelligence capabilities. The organization has detected indicators of compromise IOC that suggest a sophisticated adversary is attempting to gain access. The challenge lies in determining the most effective use of limited resources to both mitigate the current threat and prevent future occurrences, all while adhering to relevant U.S. cybersecurity regulations and best practices. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive understanding of the threat by correlating IOCs with known tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTP. This allows for a more accurate impact assessment, enabling the organization to allocate resources effectively to address the specific nature of the threat. By understanding the adversary's methods, the organization can implement targeted defenses and improve its overall security posture, which aligns with the principles of due diligence and risk management expected under U.S. cybersecurity frameworks like NIST. This proactive and informed approach minimizes potential damage and demonstrates a commitment to continuous improvement in security operations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate remediation without understanding the underlying TTPs is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to a whack-a-mole scenario where defenses are applied reactively, failing to address the root cause of the attack. This lack of strategic depth could result in repeated compromises and a failure to meet the reasonable security expectations mandated by regulations. Furthermore, neglecting to analyze TTPs means missing opportunities to learn from the incident and adapt defenses, which could be viewed as a failure in risk management and potentially violate the spirit of regulations requiring organizations to maintain a robust security program. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes gathering more IOCs without correlating them to TTPs or assessing impact is also professionally flawed. While more data can be useful, an unfocused collection effort without analysis can lead to information overload and delayed decision-making. This can exacerbate the impact of the attack and demonstrate a lack of efficient incident response, which is a critical component of cybersecurity compliance. This approach fails to translate raw data into actionable intelligence, hindering effective risk mitigation. A third incorrect approach that focuses on immediate, broad-based system patching without understanding the specific threat vectors is also problematic. While patching is essential, a reactive and indiscriminate approach can be resource-intensive and may not address the actual vulnerabilities exploited by the adversary. This can lead to unnecessary disruption and may not effectively prevent the specific attack, demonstrating a lack of targeted threat intelligence application and potentially failing to meet the requirements for a risk-based security approach. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured incident response framework. This includes 1. Identification of the incident and initial IOCs, 2. Containment and eradication of the immediate threat, 3. Analysis of IOCs to understand the adversary's TTPs, 4. Impact assessment based on the identified TTPs and potential business disruption, 5. Remediation and recovery, informed by the impact assessment and TTP analysis, 6. Post-incident review and lessons learned to improve future defenses and threat intelligence. This systematic approach ensures that responses are both effective and efficient, aligning with regulatory expectations and best practices for cybersecurity. Question 19. Research into the most effective and responsible approach for conducting network-wide vulnerability scans within a U.S.-based financial institution, considering the need to identify security weaknesses without disrupting critical trading operations or violating data integrity. Option A. Schedule comprehensive scans during off-peak hours, obtain explicit authorization from system owners for the defined scope and timing, and utilize risk-based prioritization for scanning efforts. Option B. Conduct scans using the most aggressive settings available to ensure maximum detection, even if it means potential service interruptions during business hours. Option C. Perform scans on a random basis without prior notification to system administrators to maintain an element of surprise for security testing. Option D. Initiate full network scans immediately to identify all potential vulnerabilities as quickly as possible, regardless of system criticality or operational impact. Correct answer is A. Schedule comprehensive scans during off-peak hours, obtain explicit authorization from system owners for the defined scope and timing, and utilize risk-based prioritization for scanning efforts. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for comprehensive vulnerability data with the potential impact of scanning activities on production systems. Organizations must ensure their vulnerability scanning practices are effective in identifying risks without causing service disruptions or data integrity issues. This requires careful planning, risk assessment, and adherence to established best practices and relevant regulatory guidelines. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased and controlled vulnerability scanning strategy. This includes conducting scans during scheduled maintenance windows or off-peak hours to minimize disruption to critical business operations. It also necessitates obtaining explicit authorization from system owners before initiating scans, ensuring that the scope and timing are clearly defined and understood. Furthermore, employing a risk-based approach to prioritize scanning efforts, focusing on critical assets and known high-risk vulnerabilities, is a hallmark of professional practice. This aligns with the principle of due diligence in cybersecurity, aiming to protect information assets effectively and efficiently. While specific U.S. regulations like HIPAA or PCI DSS may mandate vulnerability scanning, the overarching principle of responsible scanning to identify and mitigate risks without undue disruption is a universally accepted best practice in the U.S. cybersecurity landscape. Incorrect approaches analysis. Initiating comprehensive, unannounced vulnerability scans during peak business hours without prior authorization is a significant professional and ethical failure. This approach demonstrates a disregard for operational continuity and can lead to service outages, data corruption, and financial losses for the organization. Such actions could also violate service-level agreements, SLAs, and potentially lead to noncompliance with regulations that require the protection of data integrity and availability, such as those under the purview of the NIST cybersecurity framework, which emphasizes operational security. Conducting scans with overly aggressive configurations that could overwhelm network resources or target systems not explicitly included in the authorized scope is another failure. This reckless approach not only risks system instability, but also constitutes a breach of trust with system owners and could be interpreted as a violation of internal security policies and potentially external compliance requirements related to responsible data handling and system access. Performing scans without a clear understanding of the target environment architecture or the potential impact of specific scanning techniques is also professionally unsound. This lack of preparation can lead to unintended consequences, including false positives or negatives, and can inadvertently trigger security alerts or incident response procedures, wasting valuable security team resources and potentially masking genuine threats. This demonstrates a failure to apply a risk-based methodology, which is a foundational element of effective cybersecurity management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic and risk-aware approach to vulnerability scanning. This involves 1. Understanding the organizational context. Identify critical assets, business operations, and potential impacts of scanning. 2. Defining scope and objectives. Clearly articulate what systems will be scanned, what types of vulnerabilities are being sought, and the desired outcomes. 3. Planning and scheduling. Coordinate scanning activities with IT operations and business stakeholders, prioritizing off-peak hours or maintenance windows. 4. Obtaining authorization. Secure explicit approval from system owners and relevant management before commencing any scanning activities. 5. Configuring tools responsibly. Use scanning tools with appropriate settings to minimize performance impact and avoid unintended consequences. 6. Risk assessment. Prioritize scanning efforts based on asset criticality and known threat intelligence. 7. Review and remediation. Analyze scan results promptly and develop a plan for addressing identified vulnerabilities. 8. Continuous improvement. Regularly review and refine scanning processes based on lessons learned and evolving threat landscapes. Question 20. The efficiency study reveals that the incident response team at a U.S.-based financial services company is consistently exceeding its defined recovery time objectives, RTO, following security incidents, but the root cause analysis phase is often rushed and documentation is incomplete. Which of the following actions best addresses this deficiency while adhering to U.S. regulatory frameworks like the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, GLBA, and the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, PCI DSS? Option A. Implement mandatory post-incident review meetings with cross-functional stakeholders to thoroughly document the incident, identify root causes, and develop actionable remediation plans, ensuring compliance with regulatory requirements for incident handling and reporting. Option B. Focus solely on technical eradication and system recovery, assuming that meeting RTOs is the primary indicator of an effective incident response, and defer detailed documentation and root cause analysis to a later, less critical time. Option C. Immediately increase the incident response team's staffing and budget to accelerate all phases of the incident response process, including identification, containment, eradication, and recovery, to meet RTOs more consistently. Option D. Automate the incident response process as much as possible to reduce human error and speed up response times, without significantly altering the existing documentation and root cause analysis procedures. The correct answer is A. Implement mandatory post-incident review meetings with cross-functional stakeholders to thoroughly document the incident, identify root causes, and develop actionable remediation plans, ensuring compliance with regulatory requirements for incident handling and reporting. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals that the incident response process at a U.S.-based financial institution is experiencing delays in critical phases, impacting recovery time objectives, RTO, and potentially leading to significant financial and reputational damage. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing immediate operational needs with long-term security posture improvements, all while adhering to strict regulatory requirements. The pressure to restore services quickly can sometimes lead to shortcuts that compromise thoroughness, creating a conflict between speed and compliance. The correct approach emphasizes a structured, phased incident response that aligns with established best practices and regulatory mandates. Specifically, for a U.S. financial institution, Adherence to regulations like the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act (GLBA) and the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard (PCI DSS) is paramount. These frameworks mandate robust incident response capabilities, including timely identification, containment, eradication, and recovery, with a strong emphasis on post-incident analysis to prevent recurrence. A methodical approach ensures that all necessary steps are taken to mitigate the incident's impact, restore normal operations securely, and meet legal and compliance obligations. This proactive and systematic methodology is the cornerstone of effective cybersecurity risk management in regulated industries. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate system restoration without proper containment and eradication risks reintroducing the threat or leaving residual vulnerabilities. This directly violates the principles of effective incident response and can lead to further breaches, which would be a failure to comply with GLBA requirements for safeguarding customer information and PCI DSS's mandate for protecting cardholder data. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on technical eradication without involving legal and public relations stakeholders, ignores the broader implications of a security incident, including potential regulatory reporting obligations and reputational damage. This oversight can lead to non-compliance with breach notification laws and damage the institution's trust with its customers and partners. Furthermore, neglecting the lessons learned phase means the organization misses a critical opportunity to improve its defenses and processes, increasing the likelihood of similar incidents in the future, and failing to demonstrate a commitment to continuous improvement as expected by regulatory bodies. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that integrates technical expertise with regulatory awareness and business impact assessment. This involves 1. Understanding the incident's scope and potential impact on business operations and sensitive data. 2. Consulting relevant regulatory requirements, e.g., GLBA, PCI DSS, to guide response actions and reporting obligations. 3. Prioritizing containment and eradication to prevent further damage. 4. Planning and executing recovery in a secure manner. 5. Conducting a thorough post-incident review to identify root causes and implement corrective actions. 6. Documenting all actions for audit and compliance purposes. This systematic process ensures that the response is effective, compliant, and contributes to the organization's overall security resilience.